Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lizzie and today we're going to do my winter wrap-up. I thought I was going to do things monthly, but then I realized that I was a little too busy, so part of this video was recorded like a few months ago, and then this part is recorded after the fact, and then we'll get back into it. So to get started, we can look at my January spread and go a little more in depth with this. So for those of you who did not watch my first video, I pick a Greek god and the astrological sign of that month and just kind of put it in here so I remember for the book that I'm going to write. So for January, I picked Hera, and she's a goddess of women, marriage, family, and children. And the little blurb I put about her is she is mostly known for her pursuit to make Zeus her husband and to punish anyone else who he wants to go after. And then Capricorn, I just put the symbol in that they're of earth and they're disciplined, good-mannered, unforgiving, know-it-all, self-assured, and responsible. And then I put Saturn on these because that's the sign of Capricorn, or that's the planet with Capricorn. So my books that I was in the middle of last year included, or that I was starting, so the ones that I wanted to start to finish this month was Six Crimson Cranes, Dreams Lie Beneath, and then the books that I was in the middle of was The Unbroken, When We Left Cuba, A Discovery of Witches, and No Safe House. So I'm going to go in order of when I finished. So the first one was The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. And this is a book that follows Luca and Touraine. Luca is royalty, and she's trying to prove to her uncle that she can run the kingdom. And to do so, she's going to this province where the other main character, Touraine, has been deployed. So they meet, and Touraine is she was basically a slave, and she's brought back to where she was originally from, and that kind of ensues a rebellion with other rebellious forces, and then Luke is trying to keep that in track. In theory, that should be really interesting and fun to read, but this was one of the most boring books that I've read. I don't know why I finished it. I was about to DNF it, but then I just decided to finish it. I only gave it 2 stars because I'm DNFing the series. So it was kind of just a disappointment. Along with that, the characters seemed that they said that they believed in one thing, but then did something else entirely. And the main characters also made a few stupid decisions that I don't know why. It felt like they were just doing that to advance the plot. And with that, there was not that much plot. Mostly it was a big thing happened, and then there were pages and pages and pages of things not happening. So this is like a big chunk of a book, and it could have been probably half that size. But on good news, the second book I read of the year was my favorite so far. It was my first 5-star read of the year, and that was Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. This book is about our main character, Shori, and all of her brothers, which there are 6 of them, and she kind of gets in the way of her father's new wife, and she's like living the Six Crimson Cranes tale, and she gets a bowl placed on her head permanently, and she has to figure out a way to tell everyone that she is the lost princess without telling everyone she's a lost princess, because her curse is that she can't speak, and anytime that she utters a word, one of her brothers will die for every word that she says. So it was really cool and interesting, and it was a little bit of a romance that I absolutely loved. Honestly, I shipped them, and this is the first of a series. I already have the second book on pre-order, so if that says anything about it, I don't know what else does. I usually don't start series first off, but this was just absolutely cute and a really good story. Anyone who likes Asian-inspired reads, this is a really cute one that I highly recommend. I put a quote here, and it says, "If fate is a bunch of strings, then I'll carry my scissors." And I just thought that was really cute, and I had to include it because it was my favorite book so far. The next book that I read was A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, and I was excited for this series, but this starting book not only was like 700 pages in the edition that I have, but it was so detail-oriented that it was so hard to get through. The only reason that I got through it was because of the audiobook, and that's how I'm listening to the second one right now as well. The audiobook honestly is pretty good, and I recommend it. Honestly, just try to get through this one because the second one is getting a lot better if you like history. So, recommended, but it's really long if you don't necessarily want something like that. Is based on witches and vampires and almost dark academia, but in an adult setting. So that's also really interesting to see because I usually only read young adult, but this is a full adult. There are some sexy scenes, so beware of that if you don't know that already. But I did like it, and I would recommend it to anyone looking for to get into more adult things when they like fantasy. The next book I read was one of my OwlCrate books, and it's Dreams Lie Beneath by Rebecca Ross, and I included a quote on this one as well. The wizened character said this to the main character, and it's be patient and be shrewd, and I just thought that was cute because, like I said, it was another just good book that I read. And it's about every new moon, anyone's dreams that they would have, necessarily more of nightmares that someone would have, that they come alive on the new moon. And there are people who have to go and fight the dreams so that they don't like terrorize everyone for the rest of the book. And I like this one. I think there were some things that could have been better with it, but for an overall just quick read, it is kind of long. It's like 400 or 500 pages, but honestly I read it in probably like a day or two, and it's a standalone, so you don't have that big commitment of a series. So it was good for what it was, and if you're just looking for something quick to read. Next book that I read was When We Left Cuba by Chanel Cleeton, and this book is basically the second in a series. The first was When We Left Havana by the same author, and honestly, they are basically the same book. They both follow the same family, and the one is the younger sister, and this is the older sister. Her name's Beatrice, and she becomes a spy for America to try to get into Cuba and take down Fidel. But with all of that, it is almost entirely romance-based, and like I said, it's basically the same book as the first book. There are like 3 scenes that I can name off the top of my head that happen in both books, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I felt like I was reading the book before over again, and I liked the last book, but it was kind of, I wanted something else. I wanted more focus on the spies and stuff, so this just wasn't my cup of tea necessarily, but it was okay, so I gave it 3 stars. And the last book that I read this month was No Safe House by Lynn Barclay, and this book is another sequel. It is a sequel to No Time for Goodbye, and it's kind of interesting in the way that it shows how normal people can get involved in the mafia/mob type activity. It wasn't the best book I've ever read, and thrillers aren't necessarily my favorite type of book, but for what it was interesting. I got through it. It had really short chapters, so that also made it really easy to just fly through it. So I recommend it if you like something to fly through quickly. And that is all the books that I read for January. Welcome back to Present Me, and this is my February spread, and that's Aquarius in their air. Their strengths are that they're progressive, original, independent, and who knows what that word is? Humanitarian, that's what that says. Their weaknesses are temperamental, aloof, uncompromising, runs from emotional expression. And then the god that I chose that month is Athena, and she's a goddess of wisdom. And the little blurb that I have about her is that Zeus, in an attempt to prevent a curse, drank his wife, Metis, so she wouldn't bear his son. Time passed, and Zeus keeled over in pain, and Athena sprung from his head. And this is a little drawing of Athena, and then her owl, because I didn't know what to put over here, so I just did that. This is my TBR. As you can tell, it's 5 books, but I only read 1, which is kind of disappointing, and that's also why I figured that I would combine all my videos, just because this month is very short. So the only book that I read this month was Shadow of Night by Deborah Harkness, and this, again, is a very big book. But I like this a lot better than the first one, which is Discovery of Witches, and this is a trilogy. But just so you know, this one is set in more of a historical fiction, and I really liked that about it. I like this one a lot better than the first one. And the character development is okay. I think, like I said, what really saved it was the historical aspects of this. I feel like the characters they're doing their thing, but it's, I don't know, sometimes I just don't think it works for me. It's very romance heavy, and I just don't know if I like this epic romance type of thing. I'm going to finish the series, but we'll see everything at the end. And then since I had all of this blank space, I just filled it up with some moths on this. And then this is just, you can pause if you want to read it, if you can read my handwriting. I know that I can't, but I know the overall feeling of this is, it starts with me saying that I don't know what to do with this blank space, and like how it's a mistake that I made it, and it's my fault that I have this blank space that I don't know what to do with, and it's very clearly like a big mistake that I could rip it out or I could leave it in, and I decided to make the best of the mistake and own up to it and fill it with something that I could appreciate later on, and that it's okay to make mistakes. And like, I'm very glad that I got a blank page to fill up with some thoughts to be creative. And I was reading a lot of essays at the time for school, so like Virginia Woolf definitely inspired more introspective thoughts of this, so that was also kind of fun. This is my March spread. Pisces is this month, and it's a water sign. And the strengths are compassionate, artistic, intuitive, gentle, wise, and musical. And the weakness is that they're fearful, overly trusting, sad, desire to escape reality, and victim or martyr. And the god of this month is Hermes. He's a messenger of the gods, and he's also the god of road, flock, commerce, and thieves. The little blurb that I have here, this says, in his first days of life, he stole Apollo's cattle. In a show of good faith, he gifted Apollo a lyre of his invention. In return, Apollo gave him 3 winged maidens who could foretell future. Zeus also appointed him messenger of Hades, so Hephaestus forged him a helmet to make him invisible, and the sandals with wings so it could help him with his travels. Because I had such a bad reading month the month prior, I decided only to do 4 books that I absolutely had to read this month. And I did actually get through all of them, so it wasn't that bad. Well, I actually didn't get through all of them. I read 2 of these books, and then I'm hopefully going to finish the other 2 here soon, because I'm in the middle of this one, and I didn't even start this one, so that's a journey for a different day. So, the first book that I read this month was The Ivory Key, and this was from Owlcrate, and I honestly really liked this. It said that it was inspired from National Treasure, and you very much got that vibe from it. The only problem that I have with it is that it was suspense in the wrong times, so she would like hold suspense when they're trying to figure out puzzles, and it is the most boring thing to read someone try to figure out a puzzle. Like, she didn't skip ahead, she kind of like walked through the thought process, which in theory should be cool, but it wasn't. And then she like kind of skipped ahead on some fight scenes that could have actually been really suspenseful and stuff, but she just left it like that. So I rated it 4 stars. It was pretty good. This is the first of a series, I believe, and I am excited to pick up the next one. The sibling relationship also really drove this home, because I love anything with sibling relationships, because my sister and I are very close, so I really love to read books about sibling relationships. The next books that I read were the first two of Darker Shade of Magic series, and I really liked these. I am becoming obsessed with V.E. Schwab. Her writing style is it's just exactly my style. I love everything that she does. The Darkest Shade of Magic and A Gathering of Shadows. I love that the characters from this book actually changed into this book. And I know that's more of like an adult thing where things actually happen, and the YA thing is more of they tell you that things are happening but aren't showing. And one thing in particular that I love, that a fight that happened in the beginning of this book kind of mirrored a fight that happened in the end of the book, but our character learned from the mistakes in the first fight how to do something in the second fight. So characters in general in this book are amazing, and the plot is also very good. The magic system is so unique that I've never seen anything like that before, and I read a lot, not above some other people, but I definitely read more than the average person. So that was just really cool to see, and I haven't even finished the series, and I'm definitely probably going to call this one of my favorite series of all time. The next book that I read was The City That We Became by N.K. Jemisin, and this is my first N.K. Jemisin book, and you can just tell how good of an author she is. It's just, her writing style is so profound, I guess if you want to call it that, because reading it felt like it was a modern classic. Like, just how she wrote things was it was perfect, almost, I would even say. And it was very interesting and introspective, and it was also kind of shocking that, like, this writing was in a sci-fi, almost. Not that sci-fi writing is bad, but it was just very unique to see that good of writing in a sci-fi book for me. Again, that's me saying as someone who doesn't read a lot of sci-fi, but the gist of sci-fi usually gets into things way more than they need to. And this cast of characters is so unique as well. They come from a wide variety of backgrounds, so it was very interesting. I actually listened to the audiobook of this, and the narrator was so perfect. She did all of the accents of New York. There was like special effects in the background. This was such a cool audiobook that I probably would say don't even pick up the book, like go for the audiobook, because it was actually that good. And I'm usually not one to say don't read things with your eyes, but this is definitely like you have to do the audiobook of this one. And it was good for overall. I don't know if I would actually continue the series though. I think that if I happened to have the second book, I would read it, but I don't think I'm going to seek out it. And I also think that that's just because sci-fi is not my favorite. So we'll see if I ever finish this series or not. The last book that I read this month was The Color Purple, and this is a story about our narrator. Her name is Celie, and how she was ripped apart from her family, from her sister, and her sister was the only person that loved her pretty much ever. And it's told in letters. If you haven't read it, this is also like an actual modern classic. And I read this before. This is actually a reread for me. I read it when I don't even remember how old, like early high school, like maybe 7th grade, like, so not even high school. It was like junior high or middle school. And I don't know what teacher actually let me read this, because I do not remember any of the mentions of sex. I kind of remember the talks on like God, but now reading it again, it's not about really God, it's more about spirituality, and I did not get any of that. But this was such a good book. Like, I actually read it in probably about 2 sittings, and it's really easy. It's almost like poetry reading it, because it's letters and they're short and things just come together. I think the longest letter was like maybe 5 or 6 pages. So it's just good. And this takes place in, I think, the 30s and 40s of Southern America. So the cultural aspect of things were also very interesting to read about. I love reading about history, I guess if you want to call it that, and to have letters from back then was just very interesting. Even though it's fiction, it still had the vibe of this could have happened to anyone. Like, this story is not a unique story in what happens in it. Like, the racism, the oppression, the feelings of love that come throughout this book, the sibling relationships that's in this book. It's very, you can just tell it's a classic. Like, this book is going to be around forever. And again, you can see here that I had some blank space, so I just filled it up with moths because it's a theme of the book. But then next month, or I guess not next month, next cycle will be the spring one, and I have a lot of things lined up for that. I am going on a trip here soon in like 2 weeks, and I'm going to bring all of the books from my TBRs that I haven't finished onto that trip because I'm going to have a lot of extra time to read and do things like that. So hopefully I will finish every single one of my TBRs from this. So I just looked back, and surprisingly there's only 3 books that I haven't read from this TBR. So that actually sounds very doable. Well, we'll see how this month ends. I might have to bring all of my TBR from this month and next month and what I haven't read. So we'll see. I really hope that I'm going to finish all the books, but we'll see. Alright, well, that's everything that I have today. I will see you in either a few months, or if I have some extra time, I will try to do maybe a random video here and there about my favorite books overall, just so you know my overall what I love to read. So I will see you then. Bye.